And welcome back. Last time we had a function that took a parameter called print number and a print header that didn't take anything. Right now we're not calling print number anywhere, but we'll show that again. So if we wanted to call print number, it would take an integer value, the one that we created, and actually print it out for us. And this is basically passing one parameter into a function to do something with. We can pass more than one. The parameter list can be separated by commas to add more potential variables into it. So if I wanted to pass two integers, I could do it like this. And let's just make another integer just so we can see it. And there's another number. So if I wanted to call print number, I could call it with both number and number2. And then watch this thing actually, with a little bit of modification, now we don't have num2 right here. If we modify the actual prototype, we have to modify the actual function itself, the actual argument list. So now what I have is I have two numbers here. Let's close this down a little bit so you can see it. I have two numbers here, one of which takes an integer and an integer. I pass it number and then number2. And these numbers get copied, just like before, they get copied into the new variables that are declared here, number and num2, and then printed out for us. And there you go. The order you put these numbers in really determines what's going to be done down here with them. So for example, if I had put number2 here and just put number here and ran this thing, you would see the numbers come out 142, not 42 and 100. So order matters for this. Not only order, but type matters. For example, let's make this even bigger and better. Let's put a double in here. If I put a big num in here, and I make it equal to, I don't know, 12.25, I can change my print number to be print numbers again, so that I can add two integers, and if I wanted to, I could add a double into this. If I come down here and put a double, I now have three numbers. So an integer, and a double, all coming into an integer, and a double. And we'll modify this a little bit more. And run it. Oh, it's going to fail because I didn't put the actual big num here. There we go. Helps if I put spaces too. But there you go. You can now see that the numbers are all being passed and copied into these things. This, by the way, has a definitive name called pass by value. We're passing not the variable, but the information in the variable. So the information inside number2, the information inside number, the information inside a big number. You can kind of mentally think about this as running it through a copy machine. So number2 sitting right here gets replaced with the value that sits inside here with 100. Then number gets replaced with the value that's the inside number, which is 42. And then a big number gets replaced with a number of 12.25. So the variables themselves really kind of go away. It just copies over the values into this. So that declares a num and allows me to use it. It declares a num2 and allows me to use it. It declares a num3 and allows me to use it, using the copies of the information that are passed into this. So this is how this is actually working. And we'll just take it back to the function itself. Something to think about also is that if you were to give this information in the wrong order, so let's say you gave it a big num, number, and num, what do you think is going to happen? If you've been typing along or you've played along with this at all, you can pause the video and take a look and run it and see what goes. So what happened when you did that? Anything? Well, let's run it and find out what happens. Look what happens to this, 12, 42, and 100. But we had 12.25. Yeah, that implicit conversion thing that goes on in the background will take this big number as a double and convert it down into an integer value. So you lose the precision of what's going on here. So for numbers, you can actually put things in the wrong order and not have any indication that something's gone wrong until you try to do something with them, or until you start looking at the precision of what's happening down here inside your function. So be very careful that you put the order of things in the right order and you call the function with everything in the right order. Otherwise, you will get surprising answers. So that gives us passing multiple values. If we wanted to, we could even write more functions that would be like, oh boy, some number, oh, we'll do this. Int, comma, int, copy pasta, make a new function. There's num1. There's num2. And you could do a standard cout. And there you go. Clean it up a little bit. So you could sit right after print number, you can call sum and give it number and number2. And there you go, 142. And that's how that works. So this is just a quick little example of how you could pass information in, show that when you pass it in, that it copies these things, pass by value, and allows you to use them. As a close to this one, here's an interesting concept here. Is we've been using the words declare. This thing declares the integer num and integer num2. What happens if I was to use exactly the same names up here? If I use number here, and I use number2 here, and I used big num here, what do you think is going to happen down here? So I've got exactly the same names for here as I do inside my function. Remember, these are declarations of variables to be used by the function and only this function. So if I run it, it's going to run exactly the same way. However, if I come into my function and I go, okay, number is now equal to a big num, well, no, number2. So that would, in theory, make both number and number2 be the same number, and we can print it just to see if that's true. And look what happens. Sure enough, number2 is 42, number is 100, and away it goes. Well, we call it number2. So number is, let's change this just to match things. So number is 42, number 2 is 100. It took that 100 and copied it over, and then look what you get. 100, 100, and 12.25. It changed those two numbers. At least it did here. But when I call the sum function right here, I passed in number and number2, but the sum is 142. That means that this change only existed from here to here. Once you got to the end of the function, those numbers go away. Everything declared inside the parameter list ceases to exist at the end of the function. This comes as a critical thought later on when we start talking about things like pointers and all kinds of strange stuff. But these copy by value, these values, once they're declared like this, they don't exist outside of this function. They're done. So once again, this shows you a little bit more on how to pass variables into a function. So you've got void with nothing. You've got void with something. The void says I'm not going to return anything. That's all it's saying. The function's name. and then its parameters make the signature of the function to make this thing work. So now you can pass in multiple variables to do things like addition, subtraction, statistics, whatever you need to do. They can all be passed right on into this function. Hope you all are having a great day.